All right, welcome back. Another episode of the Freight 360 podcast. We just wrapped up, well, I wasn't on it last week, but a four-part series. That was a pretty good one, Ben. All about some of the wild things going on from ELD fraud to just scams and unsafe practices. How'd you feel that series went?
It was the most interesting and eye-opening few weeks. Honestly, I can remember even doing the show. Like, even maybe going back to the pandemic, like, I learned so much. And to be honest, I've been in this like weird emotional area where I'm just like still shocked at how bad some of these things are. And
Yeah.
it's changed my framework of how I honestly view the whole industry and how I view when or if it can turn around and what would need to happen for those things. And I don't just mean like fraud and like better things. I mean just like there is such rampant like just handing out of CDLs to just anybody and everybody from so many places that I'm like, no wonder rates have not cycled in 4 years when that has never happened for more than a year and a half. And I'm like, it also makes me really wonder, realizing how intertwined that is with the government and all these things. And I'm just like, I don't know that rates will ever pick up unless you get the slowest part of the entire country to actually address these things, government and regulation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
honestly, like it's kind of depressing.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk through. I just got back from the TIA policy forum late last week. We're gonna talk through all of what's going on that side of this equation. But first, if you're brand new here, make sure to check out the rest of our content, whether it's on YouTube or on Facebook in our group, or if you're just go to our website, freight360.net. You got all the content, downloadable stuff, full-length podcast, shorts, educational videos, blogs. You've got the Freight Broker Basics course if you're looking for a training option for yourself if you're new, or maybe for your team if you're growing beyond just yourself. Leave us comments. We answer them on our Final Mile segment that comes out Tuesdays. Comment on YouTube. Send us a message through the website, etc. So all that good stuff. Like, share, subscribe. The usuals. Anything in the news before we hit on some sports and then get into it?
There's been a lot of things in the news. I don't
A
even
lot. I
know
mean, there's always like
what.
the tariff stuff. Like tariffs are on. Tariffs are being challenged. Tariffs are back on. Trump's
Well,
trying to
that's the
negotiate with
big
certain
thing.
countries to alleviate tariffs.
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court is going to hear, I think, in November whether or not they're going to uphold them or throw them out entirely, which could be a giant curveball to everything. Because
Yeah.
the money gets refunded. All of the government debt is based on that income coming in, and like actual real interest rates aren't coming down, even though the Fed did reduce interest rates last week. So
Yeah.
the
What
Fed rate went
did it go
down.
down 25 basis points, or what did it do?
Yeah, it went down 25 basis points, but I don't think everyone necessarily understands that, like, in the news, or even when, like, anyone talks about it, they think that, like, when the Fed changes, which is the short-term interest rate, it's basically what banks can borrow from the Federal Reserve overnight. That's the rate that the Fed can reduce. But, like, everyone's mortgage and, like, those interest rates are based on like the real interest rate or the demand for government debt. So like the Fed can reduce the overnight rate, but mortgage rates haven't really come down because our government deficit's up. There's uncertainty around tariffs. There's uncertainty under who and what's going on with the Fed and Supreme Court cases. So like if other countries don't want to buy more US government debt, the real interest rate doesn't come down no matter what the Fed does.
Yeah,
And
because
that's why
they're not directly tied. They correlate
no, they're
typically, but they're
correlated,
not
but they're
directly
not
tied.
tied. And like these other things have a bigger impact on it. And that's why like even the Fed's comments recently are kind of unsettling because normally when they reduce interest rates, there's a sense of knowing what's around the corner. And the Fed is making statements of like, yeah, we don't really know. Like it looks like the job market is related to the immigration policy. That could be causing this. It could be that's why unemployment is up. We're not really sure how these things will shake out. We don't know how much of these tariffs are going into inflation. Some of those numbers came out recently. They looked a little better than expected. But to be honest, like if the thing that I care about most and all of that stuff, look at what the CAS index is, which is freight shipments in the country. And it is the lowest. It's only been this low two other times in the past like
Oh
20
wait,
years. '08, Great Recession, and beginning of the pandemic are the only times the United States has moved around this little of things being purchased or sold. So, like, you can say GDP is whatever, but at the end of the day, we're not going to restaurants, we're not buying things, people aren't spending money. When there's less freight moving, the economy is not doing well and it is shrinking. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care what is a technical recession when you can look at the number of trucks moving freight every day is at one of the lowest points in the past 25 years. I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was doing some research on that actually earlier this morning to try and see like what the non freight media world is saying about all of that in general. And it came down, I saw like non freight related media talking about the oversupply of trucking assets that all, came into the market post COVID. And right, and it's what's hilarious, and then you still hear people say like, "There's a truck driver shortage, there's a CDL shortage," and it's like there is not. Like you're being fed that information by lobbying groups, ATA, for example, and it makes its way to headlines when it's not the reality in our industry. So,
No.
but anyway, sports, man. I don't know. So I watched NFL Red Zone this weekend on Sunday to kind of watch like every game that was going on because I went to the Bills game Thursday night. Nice win over Miami. Um, but dude, a ton of like blocked kicks and just wild endings. The Steelers game, you got the
Yeah.
W there. The Browns beat the Packers somehow. Um, Philly I don't know if you saw the Philly game. They were about to lose to a game-winning field goal from the Rams, and Philly blocked a field goal and ran it back for a touchdown. Um, yeah, Buccaneers Jets game was another one just like that. There were so many just wild, absolutely wild games. But the Steelers, man, 2-1. I think Aaron Rodgers is kind of feeling good there. So
Looking pretty decent. I will say, I mean, two quick touchdowns. I don't think he had more than 67 yards between after the first two touchdowns and the touchdown in the last couple minutes. So
yeah,
pretty slow offensively the majority of the game. And it's just the O line. Like, I don't think he had the time to go downfield and really open up some more options for him. So, in fact, Roethlisberger was talking about that last week. Is that like they really need? And I can't remember who he was. He was singling out somebody on the O line that he thinks is just like absolutely not able to
well,
keep up.
you look at your division, man, the AFC North. The Browns are the Browns. The Bengals lost Joe Burrow, which I was curious if I know Steven wasn't on. He didn't talk at all in last week's episode.
Yeah.
But he's got to be. See, usually like the Bengals start off 0-2 and then start getting some wins, and they started off 2-0, and now they're going to have some losses. So, but yeah, it's Baltimore's 1-2, Pittsburgh's 2-1. It should be an interesting AFC North. Maybe a wild card spot for the Steelers, depending on what happens in Baltimore. I don't know. I don't know. Still a few undefeated teams out there. The Bills, the Colts looking really good this year. Chargers, Philly, and the Bucks and the Niners. So there's I guess 6 teams left. Haven't lost a game yet. I was talking to Trey last night. I'm going to go on his show this afternoon. Um, he's like, man, he's like, when the Chiefs go to Orchard Park to play the Bills, he's like, I'm pretty sure the Bills are going to be 7-0. And I was like, yeah, we have a fairly easy schedule early on. All of our, well, I shouldn't say fairly easy because all of our difficult opponents are all at home. So you get a little, get the home field
Yeah.
advantage and whatnot. So, but I'm looking forward to it, man. It's gonna be good, good, good season here. So, if anyone's a baseball fan, we're wrapping up the season this week, and you got a race for some wild card spots in the American League. So if you're tuned in on that, I think it's Detroit, Boston, Houston, and Cleveland, I think, are like the 4 that are all fighting for like 3 spots. So good luck to all your teams out there. Is the Ryder Cup coming up?
It is. I think it's this week, and I should have known that, but I have had a busy week and haven't had a chance to take a look at this. But yeah, I'm 99% sure it's this week.
Let's see. Ryder Cup. It's always a fun one. We'll see. I don't have anything in front of me to reference here. It's at Bethpage. So it's Long Island, right? I know it's in New York.
Yes.
I just know that I think Kevin Dillon, the actor, he's in Entourage and a bunch of other stuff. I'm pretty sure he's
Yep.
like a member there. I've heard him on podcasts talking about Bethpage. So, all right, let's get into it, Ben. Had a nice week on the Hill. What you want to ask me? I mean, what do you? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about all of it because I haven't had a chance to catch up with you at all.
Yeah, so
So
so I'll kind of give you like a high
give me
level,
the
and then we can get
overview and then we'll
get into
dig
the
into
weeds. So like,
specifics. Yeah.
this was my fourth year going to the policy forum, and if you guys don't understand how this works, the TIA, it's Transportation Intermediaries Association. If you're not a member, I highly recommend it. Ben and I, along with Chris Jolly, we're actually coaches for their new broker training program. Um, and they're a great organization with a few thousand member companies that are they're basically our voice, right? They're a lobbying organization. They help set industry benchmarks and standards and things like that. They provide model contracts, and they're a good, great organization that represents us as brokers. So throughout the year, they have a government affairs division that spends time with members of Congress and staffers about various topics and issues that are related to our industry, right? They're our voice day in and day out throughout the year while we're doing our job. And then once a year, they do a big fly-in event where whoever wants to participate flies into DC, and we spend an entire day on the Hill, visiting as many members of Congress as we possibly can. You kind of break up into different groups based on the state that your company's in. So, like, I was on Team Tennessee because my company's based in Tennessee, and I don't think anyone was there from Kentucky, so we hit up a Kentucky office as well. Um, and you talk about we kind of blitz them. We blitz the Hill and talk about as many of the we reiterate the issues that maybe they have heard about or haven't heard about. So we add on in one big fell swoop to what the government affairs division does throughout the year. Um, so and then in addition to that, there's a bunch of other ancillary events and roundtables and meetings and panels and stuff like that go on throughout the week.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
All right, so like I said, this is the fourth year now that I've been going down there, and it came around the time that fraud became a rampant issue. Before that, there's probably legislation and different discussion points, but when our industry came under heavy attack from double brokering, cargo theft, all the things we talked about the last month in that series, we made a heavier push to get more members there and start telling our stories about how it's impacted our companies, our lives, etc. 2022, I go there, I didn't know what to expect, and it's a little intimidating the first time, but after a couple of meetings, you kind of get used to it and realize that you're either talking to a member of Congress who puts their pants on the same way as you do, or you're talking to a low, mid, or higher level staffer who maybe isn't even listening to you and is just thinking about what they're going to have for lunch, or they're learning from you, or they actually know more about this than you do, and you guys can talk together and learn from each other. So it's
I'd
really
really like to
cool.
know how often the last one happened.
We had like one or two like that this year, and I'll talk through some of them. But so 2022, we go there, and the general consensus is like, what's a freight broker? Like they didn't really understand who we were and what the industry
Yep.
was. And then the next year, they're like, oh yeah, we remember you guys from last year. And they're starting to they remember what we do, and we're re-emphasizing all these issues. So that was 2023. By 2024, we had a House bill that was introduced and sponsored, that was the Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act. And that's the one that was intended to give the FMCSA the authority to impose civil penalties.
Did
Well,
it?
naturally, you have an election and you have a new Congress. So by the time we're there this year, that bill is still there, but it had to be reintroduced in the new Congress. It's under HR 880 now. It had a different, I think it was like 4 digits last year. But anyway, HR 880, which now has an accompanying Senate bill, 337. So it's still the Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act, but now we've got like bipartisan support, and it's got a House and a Senate equivalent to it. About to be hopefully passed, and there's a variety of different ways that a bill can get passed, but that's another discussion. But
What did
we've
they
come
tell
this
you
far,
about that?
right? And we've had
Just
some really good conversations.
just generally speaking, what is the expectation of when it could get passed? Best case scenario.
So we asked that question, and like I said, there's a lot of different ways to pass a bill. The most common way is like a giant bill gets passed, and in that bill, like
This gets
a lot
added.
of little bills get tossed in there, like the Great Big Beautiful Bill or whatever that Trump
Yes.
pushed through. Like that's an example of one of those. Another way, and this was actually recommended to us by Congressman DeJarle from Tennessee. We met with him directly, and he's like, "You guys, you only need to have." I forget the exact number. He's like, "But if you have that amount of people that are signed onto it, it can just be like brought up when Congress is in session, voted on really quickly, and passed, and then sent to the Senate." So we don't know the exact number of people that have it that are sponsoring it. But that's another avenue, and there's other various ones too. If they do a funding bill, they can tie it into that. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get a bill passed. By the way, it has to go through the House and then to the Senate. Then if legislation is approved, and the whole other story then is like, are they actually going to follow through and do what if the FMCSA has the authority, are they going to use it? And that's like a whole nother conversation, though. But that's how far we've come in a matter of just it's really 3 years, but it was September of 22 to September of 25. What I thought was interesting though is like we started meeting with FMCSA last year, so this year was the second year, and they had the FMCSA's chief counsel, because the FMCSA hasn't had like a head honcho in a little while. There's been like interims and things like that, but there's a new guy coming in that we're fairly supportive of. But their chief counsel, who's a lawyer, right, comes and speaks to us in the most political way possible, and he was asked a lot of hard questions like, "Hey, we've been doing this, why hasn't X, Y, and Z happened, and when can we expect ABC, blah blah blah." And he gave the most, that's such a great question, and I really think that if we just all work together and blah blah blah. Like he gave such canned answers, it was almost annoying. But you have to remind yourself that like the FMCSA is not, they don't just care about brokers. Like we're like the small potatoes compared to every trucking company authority that's out there, and freight forwarders and moving companies and commercial bus companies. Like they all fall under the FMCSA. So we had a meeting with him, and then the after that, before we went on the Hill, and this is something that's really cool that I wasn't totally aware of, is we had a briefing, bipartisan briefing, in this really cool room, like if you ever see like committee meetings like on TV where like they're all staying there and like people are getting interviewed and whatnot. Like it was one of those rooms. It was pretty cool, and it was the surface transportation reauthorization briefing. So basically, like every it's like usually like 5 or 6 years, there's the Department of Transportation has a transportation reauthorization, which basically re-ups the funding and the priorities for what's going to be spent on what, and kind of the roadmap ahead, and it has to be reauthorized every 5 or 6 years. So the current authorization expires at the end of fiscal year 2026, which is September 30th of next year, right? So they've got a year, which might seem like a lot of time, but there's a lot of backwards plan to do to have it reauthorized going into October of 2026. So we kind of learned what that process is, and A lot of what I'll talk about today and the things that we were asking for with these congressional meetings, the intent is not to pass individual bills, but to make them part of this reauthorization next fall. So that already tells you how slow things happen in DC, right? Like if we have these great asks, these great things that I'm gonna mention here that they're not new to anybody, we're waiting until at least a year from now before they could potentially be written into actual law here.
You've seen the headlines. Freight fraud isn't going anywhere. But if you're a QuickScope customer, you're not seeing it in your business. QuickScope is a cutting-edge, load-level visibility tool that stops fraud before it starts, right where it happens. Inside the transaction, no noise, just results. With unlimited usage and by far the most cost-effective product on the market, QuickScope delivers real value without the bloated price tag or platform confusion. And here's the kicker. Version 2 of QuickScope drops this summer, packed with powerful new features and AI integrations that'll make your visibility game even stronger. Sign up today and you'll be locked in at today's pricing when version 2 goes live. Stop chasing fraud. Start stopping it. Visit quickscope.com. That's QUIKSKOPE and learn more.
So
Yeah, it's kind of depressing. It's funny. It's just like I had family that have worked in DC a long time, and even like aunts and things that have worked within the military and Congress, and specifically on like medical things. And my always takeaway is basically like these things get passed with political capital, meaning like you got to have like a high ranking senator or congressman that is owed enough favors from others that he can whip the party and get them to support their bill to push it to actually do it, which is, to your point, literally step one. Then do they have the ability, not necessarily the authority or funds to actually implement it, right? Like I'm looking at the TIA thing you sent, right? And it's like number 2 on the list. Number 1's repealing outdated requirements. 2, finalizing broker qualification standards. 3, clarifying the role of dispatch services. I just want to read number 2, right? The bill directs the U.S. Department of Transportation to finalize the broker and freight forwarder certification requirements that were enacted in MAP 21 more than a decade ago. These requirements ensure that brokers are operated by individuals with at least 3 years of experience or demonstrated industry knowledge. Here's the kicker. Despite being law since 2012, these standards have never been implemented. This gap leaves the industry vulnerable to unqualified actors and potential fraud. Finalizing these rules will raise industry standards, strengthening oversight, and ensure those managing freight transactions are qualified and accountable. So like this whole process you were just talking about that took 4 years to get to here, we're a year away from maybe some of these things getting implemented. The ones that were passed into law in 2012 still aren't implemented and still have had zero impact and nothing was done with them. So it's like you have this giant thing you've got to get all the way to even getting to that point. But even once you get to that point, that doesn't mean that those things are going to actually impact anything.
That was, I'm glad you brought that one up because that was
super
a big,
depressing.
I'm gonna circle back to that in a second. I want to wrap up the bill, the first one that we talked about from last year as well, the household goods. So this is the one that gives the FMCSA the ability to impose that $10,000 fine for
double brokering, unlicensed brokering.
Yep.
Carrier tenders loads to other carriers should be a $10,000 fine per the FMCSA, but they can't, one, actually impose the fine or collect the fine.
Yeah, other part of that is going to require a physical address for brokers, and carriers. So, for example, like PO boxes or your little UPS store addresses, like your little box there, not going to be okay. So, as of now, new applicants have to use an actual address, no PO boxes. But there's still like 6,000 that like were grandfathered in, and we want that to change, right? So that's the Household Goods Act. Broker Modernization Act, which is the one that you just mentioned. And again, this is the intent here is to have these looped into the reauthorization next year. But repealing CFR 371.3C, broker transparency, right? We want that to go away altogether, and that requirement to be totally, it's outdated from 45 years ago. We want to see it gone. Broker qualification standards. So the TIA actually started to implement this themselves. because they said MAP
Yep.
21 passed under President Obama, like stated that these were the standard, right? But no one's finalizing them and actually like saying you have to like check the box. And this is like, yeah, you've got to have industry experience or the equivalent education, which is why TIA is now telling all their new members, if you don't have the experience that this requires, you have to go through our training so that we can self-certify you, saying that like you didn't have the 3 years, but we've put you through the training that we believe is industry standard, that we can rightfully allow you to be a member of our organization. And we feel that you have the knowledge you need, right? That's the qualification standards. And then you've got the dispatch services, which is like, what is a dispatch service? What are their limitations? Is there any kind of like licensing or anything like that required? That's all part of that Broker Modernization Act. And to your point, how slow does stuff work in a federal government? Like, yeah, that MAP 21 was huge when it was passed in 2012, and like here we are 13 years later, and things that were part of that just like I said before, just because they were written in doesn't mean they're actually being implemented, right? Just because the FMCSA might get the ability to impose fines, are they going to, right? Again, we don't know. So any other thoughts on that Modernization Act? Because the carrier selection one, that's the third big discussion we had, that is an interesting one that kind of ties into what we talked about the last few weeks on the show. But any other thoughts on that Modernization Act?
Which specific act of it? Which specific part? I do think there should be accountability standards and some education for the industry, right? So I think it's a good thing. But there's so many things I could break down in MAP 21 and during at which time, things actually didn't get better or worse, even over that decade, right? One of which is the requirement in MAP 21 that requires basically carriers to be treated as motor carriers or freight brokers to be treated as freight brokers, right? But to this day, there are major
we still fight that
Fortune 100 companies that will literally just force a freight broker to sign a contract or as a motor carrier. And I've looked that up and asked quite a few attorneys, and the way it stands is the onus is actually on the broker, not the shipper, that is the one requiring that agreement to be signed. And it's it doesn't even address who has the leverage in that situation, where it's yeah, MAP 21 says you, XYZ company, need to give me an agreement as a broker. But then XYZ company goes, sorry, you don't do business with me, or sign it as a motor carrier. And then it's well, okay, in practice, this means nothing. And then when you look at it, it says we're required as brokers to make sure we don't mislead the shipper, when it's the shipper forcing us to sign an agreement that is in violation of that regulation.
In freight, time is money, and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
The second big one was they repealed a lot of the English language standards that were basically around since the 1920s because of the driver shortage then, which is the beginning of how all this issues with CDLs and them just being handed out to non-domiciled drivers and people with no addresses and different statuses opened the door wide open, right? And it's and then it precedes the ELDs, which made the roads less safe, made accidents go up, solved nothing, and created a giant loophole for all of the entire domestic freight industry to have their information stolen through fraudulent ELDs. Yeah. So all of these things just made everything worse, and absolutely, in my opinion, took no steps to actually making things safer, more effective, or in any way improved from what they were prior to that.
Exactly. So the last one on here, and again, this kind of ties into safety and some of the carrier situation we talked about in the last month, is the Motor Carrier Safety Selection Standard Act. And I don't know why these all have super long hard to say and remember names. But this is one that we
It's
brought
like they get
up.
paid by the word.
Yeah. We had brought this up as kind of like an ancillary additional like discussion point last year, but it wasn't a big lobbying push. But the issue here, and this has been for years, is if you look at the FMCSA, the S in FMCSA,
Safety.
Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, should be like one of the primary focuses of that agency, right? Is safety. So when we look at safety ratings for motor carriers,
National average is 20%, meaning 1 in 5 trucks is not safe to be on the road right now. That's the actual number put out by the safety standards. 1 in 5 of the trucks you drive past shouldn't be on the road.
I'll give you even scarier stats, right? The stats that we had as of last week were that 97% of motor carrier authorities were unrated, right? So
unrated.
Out of 100 companies that are out there, 3 of them we know if they're safe or if they're not safe, right?
Yep. And wait, and of those,
we don't even know.
And of those 3 out of 100,
some
only
are unsafe.
4 out of 5 trucks are safe.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that is wild. So basically what this says is the FMCSA needs to create a federal standard for what is considered safe versus unsafe. Because right now with all these unrated companies, if there's we do a lot of interstate, like you might cross through a dozen states in a long haul shipment. Think about all the jurisdictions that you run through and what those courts are going to determine that they think is one standard versus the other jurisdiction standard. So like if I'm picking up in Boca and delivering in Buffalo, right? But there's a crash that happens in Virginia, like which court is going to take that case? What is their definition of the standard, et cetera. So we've got all these different jurisdictions that, don't have the same standard. So the FMCSA should, I'll put it as simple as this. It should be a green light or a red light. Like if I'm a broker and I'm looking to hire a carrier to contract them to haul load for my customer, I should be able to go into an FMCSA database, which realistically, if that were to happen, I'm sure companies like Highway and your vetting tools would extract that data and present it to you in a cleaner version. But the federal government should be able to tell me this carrier is safe or they are not safe, right? And sure, you got your conditional in the middle or whatever. But a federal standard that basically says like they carry the insurance that were required and they have the correct safety scores based on our inspections that we believe that they meet. We're stamping off approval that they meet our federal standards. So if you select to use this carrier, you have done your due diligence to hire a safe carrier. Let me let my dog out here real quick.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something that even precedes that, right? Like we're saying we want the standard to be at a company level, but it really needs to be at a truck level. Because when you actually take into account the nuances of how insurance can be purchased and actually is effective, meaning like in force, I could have a motor carrier, meaning a trucking company number that has the right insurance, but I might have it on one of my trucks. And I might have 15 trucks driving down the road right now that aren't insured because all of this standard is held at a company level and not an actual asset level, which is also a huge issue. And then let's layer on during DOT week of 2024, which is the last results I think that are available. I think something like 22% of people pulled over during Blitz Week had no CDL, like just didn't have a commercial driver's license. Like, so not only are 1 in 5 trucks on the road not safe, but when they were randomly pulling people over during Blitz Week, 1 in 5 had no driver's license, just not a CDL at all, right? So, and when you want to talk about like, these are the roads that everyone's tax dollars pay for. These are the roads that every tax dollar goes to pay for highway patrol, state law enforcement, the turnpikes, all of the roads you take your family on, your kids ride on a school bus to get to school, ambulances need to use to get to hospitals. every single thing that our entire country depends on to function with transportation, whether it's transporting people or goods, 20% of those vehicles are not safe driving 80 miles an hour 3 feet away in the other direction from your family going on vacation. Every single time you leave the house.
Let me make
that
that
is
scarier
horrifying.
for you, right? So I'll make it scarier for you. During DOT Blitz Week, right? 1 out of 5, right? And those are of the carriers that knew for months in advance that there was going to be a DOT Blitz Week.
Yes.
Right? Like,
still drove.
So, and that was one of one of the things we talked about.
Think how bad it is on an average day. Because knew that week was when they were pulling people over. And these people still took that risk.
That was the thing that we talked about with the chief counsel of FMCSA. One of the members of our group said, like, we love the increased inspections for Blitz Week, but can you just not announce when you're going to do it? So it's a true litmus test of,
no way, because the trucking companies are lobbying these people.
Dude, his response was, the way the FMCSA is right now, the intent, like their actual intent is not to, he didn't say it directly, but he basically said this is like, the intent isn't to actually identify, it's not to really fix the problem, it's to make the inspections happen and to make it known that we have a Blitz Week. Like, it's more about the event than it is about
public
fixing
appearance.
the event, the things that we find in the event.
The underlying
it's
problem.
Like,
correct.
What?
Well, here's another one. There are certain shipper requirements that need a safety rating for a carrier to work with that shipper, right? And I've had clients over the years, and I've been involved in some of these, where they're like, dude, like, this company wants to give me business. They're great lanes. And like, we have a good company with new equipment and experienced drivers. We don't have a safety rating. I called the FMCSA and requested to have an audit so I can get the safety rating. And the FMCSA, like, at least 6 or 7 of these I've been involved in and been on some of these calls. And the FMCSA has said, if you are requesting an audit, we know you don't need one. You're going to be the last one that gets it. Like, they'll literally tell you this.
The reality is too, like, the
don't have enough people.
FMCSA is given like a year after authority is granted before they're supposed to do an audit, right? And you get a lot of turnover.
Like you said, 3%.
What's that?
2-3% is the number you said of all the trucking companies are actually audited.
Yep. Or have that rating. Yeah. So another point that came up, and this has to do with a lot of the foreign fraud that goes on with trucking companies, brokerages too. But where you've got, like, an offshore company who's got all their minions, like, think about all the ELD fraud we talked about in the last few weeks, right? All their minions driving on the U.S. roads, and the boss is sitting over in a foreign country, like, really the one making all the money. So one of the guys had suggested, like, well, if you drive into a port or a rail yard or an airport, right, you need to have a TWIC card, right? And every year, 600,000 drivers have that, they've got to have that TWIC card. It's the Transportation Workers Identification credential. And basically, you're doing fingerprints, you're doing background check, Homeland Security, all this stuff, right? And if we just required the owner or the principal of the trucking company
to have same.
A TWIC card, that would, huge barrier to entry right there, right?
Yes.
So, because they're not going to go, if they're over in Eastern Europe or in Pakistan or wherever, right? Like, where we see a lot of these bad actors rooted from, they're not going to take the time to travel to the States and go through.
But they'll probably just have one of their truck drivers be considered the owner of the company, and they'll give them the TWIC card, and then they'll.
Right. But with your background check and your fingerprints and all of that tied to the ownership of the company, who's going to agree to do that when they know they're transferring authorities and, like, it can come back on you? Like, it would be a big deterrent. So that was an interesting one that somebody had brought up.
You know what I would have asked?
All that to say, like, a lot of good discussions. And I know I mentioned the Service Transportation Reauthorization, and I'm glad we were on the Hill last Tuesday, and I'm glad we were, because when I sat down in Marsha Blackburn's office, she was, I think, one of our last ones of the day. It was a great conversation. One of the staffers that we met with from Knoxville, or is he Knoxville or Chattanooga? I forget. But Steam Logistics, big brokerage, right? He's like, yeah, like a lot of my buddies from like college, like they all work at Steam now. He's like, I know what brokers do. I know what he's like, I know all this stuff you guys are dealing with. And he goes, we have to submit Marsha Blackburn's priorities for that service transportation reauthorization by Friday. And I said, well, I'm glad we're meeting with you on Tuesday, because you guys, but he basically said, like, we're so ahead of all this. We're like, he took her in, like, this is a senator of the state of Tennessee. She's actually running for governor next year. She's walked through and seen like the sales floor. And so I guess the takeaway here is we've got a lot of these congressional leaders that they're aware of our industry now. They're aware of the issues, and they know what they can do in order to actually make an impact. And again, we're a crumb on their plate, right? But the louder your voice is, the bigger that crumb is going to be compared to everything else on the plate.
That's the question I'd like to ask somebody like that is, okay, how much support do you need to actually get some of these things in effect, right? How many other senators you need? Are there ones that are specifically more influential than others that their support would allow this to get done faster? Who are they and how many, right? The second question I would ask as a follow-up to that is, okay, how many phone calls do they need to either receive from their constituents or dollars donated to their reelection campaign to be the equivalent of the opposing force? Because what we've learned, and I've learned in the past month going into this, is like these trucking lobbying companies are making so much money employing cheap labor, turning them over and treating them like garbage, and they are funding campaign reelection campaigns, right? Like these giant lobbying groups for huge trucking companies are making a fortune on cheap labor. Americans are losing their job. They're losing their ability to earn an income, all so that a trucking company can make more money. And then to keep that whole thing spinning, they're donating to their local congressman and senator. So what is that dollar number and who does it need to apply to and how many phone calls, right? Because if with enough pressure and enough money, like the problem is large enough. It's just that nobody is aware of it. Nobody is as upset as they should be. And honestly, like I want to just be like, listen, how many more people need to die in accidents before this becomes urgent enough to solve? And how much of our stuff needs stolen as a country before this becomes something that needs to be solved inside of another decade? Yeah, because at $35 billion a year times 10 years, right? That's $350 billion. And that number is going to go up. What, $500 billion is going to be stolen over the next 10 years if they move at the same speed they did with MAP 21, which still did nothing. So in a decade, they got nothing done. How much more do we lose and how many more people die? How many more families lose their job before this becomes a big enough problem that like you getting a few donations to your next reelection campaign is less important than your constituents' need for safety? So
the way I think that, if you take away donation, donor money, the way that stuff gets done is there's a couple ways. So so every member of Congress sits on some committee, right? There's House committees and there's Senate committees. Things like your Commerce Committee and your Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and your Defense. I don't think it's called Defense Committee, but either way, like your military type committee. So like we met with one of the members who sat on a committee that really didn't have much to do with us, but he had a staffer in his office that was focused on transportation and infrastructure. So talking to the member of the House, a lot of it was like, yeah, that's not really like the committee I sit on. That's not like I don't know about a lot of this stuff because it's not my job to be an expert in that. So he goes to his staffer like, hey, where do we sit on all this? What does it mean for whatever? And so you have to find the right staffer who's the one that is the one in their ear telling them how to vote on things. And then when you talk to someone who sits on the right committee, like the Transportation and Infrastructure, like they know all this stuff, or Commerce committees, they understand all this stuff. And when you start having, like Danielle did a great job at saying, like, this is a national security issue with like ELD fraud and whatnot.
Scare the shit out of people with the truth.
If you ever like turn on national news and you see an oversight committee that's basically grilling somebody on why they didn't do their job, that's, I think, how this stuff gets the attention it needs. Is it needs exposure, right? Because you can donate all you want and influence somebody to push for certain changes in government and legislation, or to vote a certain way. But when they're pressured publicly about, and they're looking bad for not doing their job, or for allowing things to happen that are happening in our industry, that, it's like I said, I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think that is where you really get pressure on people, and they're forced to start listening and either do their job or they don't get reelected. But again, we've put so much time and effort in the last few years, doing this every year, in the TIA staff throughout the year, on the Hill every single week. And it feels good looking back at like how far we've come, but it's like, man, it's been this long. And, if this stuff goes into law, like, it's going to take how long? And then will it even be, will they actually use the powers they have and do the things that, the law states? And so I don't know. I think it's a continued effort. And the one thing, the takeaway I want to have for brokers out there listening, and this was a really good discussion we had as members of TIA. There's a nice panel there of leadership from various brokerages. Is like, what are the things that we can do as brokers, knowing that we operate in this environment and understanding the gun that is pointed at us from these bad actors. And it came down to three things. And a lot of people, their first thought is like, oh, I just need some software. I need some technology. And that's on the list, but it's the bottom of the list out of these three priorities. But the first priority was that your staff at all levels in your company needs to have the right education on what is going on, right? What are the threats against us? How are these folks targeting things, whether it's hacked emails or putting placards on the side of trucks that are, fake, or chameleon carriers. We talked a lot about that. So it's this simple education of staying up to date on what's happening in the news. How did somebody get burned? If you can't learn from someone else's mistake, you're doing a disservice to yourself. So whenever I hear about, oh, I had a load stolen because of this happened, like, I'm taking note, either physically or mentally, like, okay, they made that mistake. I don't want to make that mistake in my company. So, like, just having the education. The second one is the proper processes, your SOPs, right? Your standard operating procedures within your organization. And that is, hey, if we're going to vet a carrier, we are going to go through X, Y, and Z steps. If carrier looks like this, here's our requirements for us to contract them. If they look like this, maybe we have a different set of standards. And I personally, for Pierce Worldwide Logistics, we have a written out, well, it's in Google Drive, but we have a written out standard operating procedure for carrier vetting, and we've built that over time, and I keep it updated. It's a living, breathing document, and as things change, we change that, and we retrain and re-educate in our entire organization as things evolve. And the last one is technology, right? Because there is always technology that's out there that will assist you to do your job better, and that's things like, you have your carrier vetting and monitoring and all that good, the tools that are out there. Everything from Highway, RMIS, MCP, Carrier Share. Like, there's plenty of tools out there. You've got other vendors that can assist you with protecting yourself, whether at a macro level or at a load level. Things like Genlogs, Quickscope, Text Locate, various other tracking, telematics, some ELD integrated, some not, like tools that are out there that you can ensure that you're sending a rate, like Highway, for example, with their RateCon tool, like you're sending a rate confirmation to the right person and it's not a hacked email. Or Quickscope, right? Before that driver gets a PO number to get loaded, I have verified that they are in the right location with the right truck at the right time, right? If they don't meet all that criteria, they don't pass go or get released their pickup number. Genlogs, a great one, right? Like, I can literally see, like, I found one a few weeks back that we talked about where stolen loads, and thanks to Genlogs and I think Ryan put out today, they have like 600 terabytes of images now or something like that, like a quarter of what Netflix has in data that they've gotten in truck pictures. But we're able to see like a VIN number, and then I see all the pictures of that VIN number on the highways, and literally, like, I see where they committed fraud before Like we could have prevented that, and that's something that we learned about. But there's technology out there, but it's all three of those, right? It's the education, the procedures and processes, and then the technology. You know, if you skip one of those three, you leave yourself vulnerable, right? If you got great SOPs and you got great technology, but someone just doesn't understand, they don't have the education, don't understand why or what they're supposed to do, it fails, right? If they know what to do and why they're doing it, but they don't have the tools to execute it, well, that sucks too. If they know, you know, if they have all the education and they have all these great tools, but you don't have a roadmap or an SOP of how to implement it's pointless. So it's a constant battle. My biggest take on it is that like you need buy-in down to the lowest level, and if you have people on your team that just repeatedly fail to believe or understand how risky this is, or they fail to use the tools and processes that you provide for them, you need to take a hard look in the mirror and ask yourself, is that person a fit for your team? Because this is the kind of stuff that can you know, crumble your business. It can tarnish a brand that's been around for 40 or 50 years. You could even, like, if you have, like, we have agents at Pierce, right? We, you know, if one great agent has one bad, you know, load, and, you know, it could cost them a customer, which could cost them their agency, right? Their business. So rant over. That's my take on all of it, Ben.
I would say this, right? And everything you listed, right? All of which are recommended. And I think is a really good point that you need layers of security. There's not one layer that catches everything. And in every single one of those layers, there is a vulnerability, some bigger, some smaller, right? In tech, in your second level of tech, and maybe in your third. So those loopholes or those areas that can be exploited, when you layer on the second one, there might be a loophole over here, but your second layer, the loophole's over here. So technically this one catches that loophole and this one catches this one. And then your third one might have a loophole, but it catches the first two and maybe has another one. So you get a little more security.
You get that
And then the same thing with
yeah.
operational procedures, right? Like there is not one thing you can do that protects you from everything. But if you've got 4 layers, 2 or 3 layers of tech, right? Maybe even 3 or 4 in some instances. And now you have operational education and insight into what to look for in the information you're getting from that tech, right? And then some manual things on top of it. You're getting very close to 100. Like nothing's 100. But like we talked about this before air is like, dude, every single load that I've seen stolen, okay, that I've ever been involved in, probably 40 in the past year and a half, give or take, maybe 2 years. The first thing I do is I do all the steps we talked about. I go through every layer of my tech stack and I look to see where I can find the red flags, right? And in every single one, I found the red flags, usually 3, 4, or 5 that were missed, right? The one that always seems to get me the answer is just calling the older FMCSA phone number and just, hey, want to verify this load. Does this dispatcher work for you, or is this truck, you know, registered with you? And in every one of those stolen loads, the person that picked up the phone went, oh, dude, don't book a load with us. Like our stuff got hacked, or I sold the company and I've been getting phone calls. So every single one, I've been able to find out that you shouldn't book the carrier after the load got stolen, which means if you would have called them before you booked the load, you would have prevented that, right? But even as the whole episode was playing, I'm like, I know the vulnerability in the phone call too. And I know how criminals are working around that one too. So like none of them are foolproof. But like that is the one that I probably talk about the most because it is the easiest one to do, even for companies that have very cheap tech stacks or newer companies that can't afford every program out there. Like just that phone call prevents so much of this. But I do absolutely, because I had a call with one of our clients yesterday on this, and I'm like, I absolutely would not move a load in this industry without at least these 2 pieces of software. Like I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, I know what to look for. I know all of the free software. And you and I have relationships with companies that like we can get information that isn't even readily available. And I'm like, I absolutely still wouldn't move a load without these tools, right? Like, even though they're not perfect, I'm like, they're absolutely a necessity in this environment that like you just absolutely shouldn't be doing things without any of these things. And we talk about them a lot. We've talked about them last week because it's just like so many of these things that we're built on weren't secure to begin with, right? The ELD was supposed to be this big secure thing. And then we realized, like, oh, nobody's looking at these, nobody's certifying them. And basically, they just have big, wide open back doors and they can all be manipulated. So, like,
Yeah.
it was even worse because it gave everybody a false sense of security, which allowed criminals to steal more because they're like, oh, we've got an ELD, give us the load. And brokers are like, oh, yeah, ELD. Where'd my load go? Wait, where 3 loads are gone? What happened? Wait a minute, that driver's macro point just pinged in another country. Wait, what is going on here, right?
Yep.
And it's like little by little, you start to see how bad the infrastructure is that we all rely on, which goes back to this whole conversation of like the FMCSA to begin with, is just like the entire database of what they should be overseeing is absolutely vulnerable, absolutely is ineffective, inefficient, way behind where the industry is. Everybody's aware of it, and they're just slowly moving towards a potential fix to this, which who knows when that comes up. But like, to me, the biggest point that I think we should all be talking about in the industry is just like, go to the things that are the simplest. Like, talk to people, like your friends, like anybody you talk to. Like, it's not safe to drive your car down the road knowing that 1 in 5 trucks should not be on the road, right? I mean, like, if you looked at a video of what happens when a tractor trailer hits anything, right? Like, that is the risk everybody takes driving on the roads every single day. And nobody is doing a damn thing to fix it or even improve it, right? You guys are. And I commend all the work the TIA is doing and all the folks we work with and you going there every year. And it's like, even with all of this effort and good intention, like nobody's coming to save us. Like, I genuinely think we all should be emailing our congressmen. We should be making phone calls and just saying, what are we doing about this? Because the more of us that are talking about this, the more the elected officials are going to pay attention and feel like their jobs depend on it. And it should. Like, one of the basic expectations we have as a citizen in this country is to drive our car down the street and not worry about being killed by somebody that isn't licensed driving an 80,000-pound vehicle that isn't safe to be on the road, right? Like, that is a pretty low bar that we have as an expectation of our society and was considered the best country to exist on the planet up until this point. But like, we can't even meet that standard. Like, that to me is absolutely insane. And that like nobody is incensed or frustrated or furious with how bad this is. I think it's just because of awareness. Like, we talked about this in a lot of the past few episodes. It's just like, so much of the folks in our industry talk about it from our points of view, which is really hard for the average person that doesn't work in our industry to understand, right?
Exactly.
It's like somebody explaining to me like the, biomechanics of like, FDA approval and like peptides. Like, yeah, that shit's way over my head. I don't live in that world. But like, we need to do a better job, I think, as an industry of really simplifying what we're trying to do and what we need our government to do, which is like, make the roads safer. Are the trucks on the road safe? The answer to that is no, unequivocally. The information the FMCSA puts out shows they're not safe, shows how many of them aren't safe, shows that most of the drivers don't even have a CDL, and the ones that do are getting them fraudulently. At the very least, some local news networks are starting to do pieces on this where like DMVs are just being defrauded for people taking tests with cameras on their shirts or like mics in their ear. Like, I mean, this is really bad and absolutely needs us as a country to talk to the people that should be fixing this in order for them to fix it. Because otherwise, like, it's out of sight, out of mind. And if there's not another accident on the major news networks in the next couple of weeks, it just becomes old news and people go on with their day and just, hey, if it's not on TikTok today, I guess it's just not something I should worry about.
Cargo theft would get more attention on national news too, like in the scale that it's happening. I remember like the pilferage in LA off the trains a few years back made some national headlines, but
this is not even close.
But it's hard, man. It's hard to get any national news. Like, when you go back to earlier this year when they put all the entire New York Army National Guard in the prison systems, and that didn't even make the national news. So, but Trump sneezes and it's going to be everywhere. So,
yeah, it's a whole other conversation that kind of terrifies me in the sense that, like, I just think that the more we thought we became connected on social media, the less connected we actually are to what's really happening.
Yep.
And again, not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but like, I think called an unintended consequence of what we thought was progress was actually societal regression of where we know much less about what's happening every day, how safe we are and whether or not anyone's doing anything about it because somebody has a new dance video on TikTok, and that's awesome. So
It's funny you talk about progress. You know MAP 21 stands for Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act.
yes.
So, all right, good discussion. Let us know what you guys think. If you agree with what we're asking for, if there's other discussion points that you think the TIA should be pushing for, because this isn't just a once a year thing. Like, I emailed everyone I met with last week. I emailed them yesterday and got some feedback from some of them. And these are conversations that you can have throughout the year. So if you know where your local congressman or congresswoman's office is when they're not in DC, go stop by. Whether you meet a staffer or a legislative assistant or chief of staff or an intern or the member, right? Sit down and have these conversations. Explain what's happening in their constituents' area and how it's impacting, you and your team and your company. So that's how your voice will be heard, not just going to DC once a year and screaming on social media. Go talk about it. Share your stories. Invite them to come out to your office and see what it's like and what you guys have, all the money you have to spend to protect yourself because the laws aren't doing it for you. So
I had a question for you. Two things. One,
Yeah.
happy birthday, buddy. It was your birthday yesterday.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
The other question was you sent us a picture. I think there was a senator from Nebraska. Did you end up sitting in that?
Senator from Nebraska.
And the reason I knew it was Nebraska is because on the episode I think you were out, we were talking about there was I think, Secretary of State from, I'm pretty sure it was Nebraska.
Let me pull up my pictures here.
And they announced that they were going to do a driver immigration program with a country of, I think it was with Kenya. And Danielle put a bunch of stuff online that country had like a 400 or 500% greater fatality risk of CDL drivers than like any other nation in the world. And Werner was cited in it, and like it blew up on social media to the point where the CEO of Werner like put out a public statement saying, we're not involved in this. And I'm like, I hadn't heard anything from it since then, but you texted a picture of a senator from that state when you were there. And I was
So
like,
I'm looking
wow.
at the pictures right now. We had Thomas Massey from Kentucky, Desjardins from Tennessee, Fleischman from Tennessee, Tim Burchett from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, Tennessee. I stopped by Tim Kennedy from New York's office just because he has a big cutout of Josh Allen. I don't see any Missouri one or Nebraska ones. You'll have to send me what it was. I don't recall meeting anybody from Nebraska though.
I thought you said you might have missed that, or like you didn't sit in there, but I'm looking up the names for the senators.
Oh, I probably sent you all the list of all the meetings that were happening, and whoever's in that state, that they would have had their own group and gone to it.
Oh, and
Yeah.
you know what it was? It was a picture the TIA put out because I looked in the audience and you weren't in the photo, and I sent it to you, I think, because
That makes sense.
And
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, I'm really curious because like this was pretty mainstream news for like that week. And now
Yeah.
they're saying there's no official agreement for Nebraska to hire Kenyan truck drivers, despite recent trade mission discussions and rumors fueled by the Kenyan press, apparently.
So back to that whole thing, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but that is where every press or every article I could find was from Kenya. It wasn't a American-based news outlet. The original sources, at least. So, but yeah, did not meet with them. I mean, we probably, I'm just gonna guess here, as an organization, we probably had over 100 people that were there, and we had probably 40 states. So basically, like Tennessee group, we hit Kentucky because they didn't have anyone there. New York also had Massachusetts. So you kind of have states covering down for one another. Typically have a lot of people from Chicago area, so Illinois. A lot of people from Texas. Florida, another big one. So, yeah. But yeah, good stuff, good conversation. Let us know what you guys think. And hopefully we can continue to get the ball closer to the end zone on this stuff and keep reacting as things change and as the landscape evolves. So, Ben, final thoughts.
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.